how did you decide to, let's say, like mix this werewolf fantasy horror subgenre, but with a more like coming of age type of story?
And so this was done very early. In the beginning, it was actually, but still kind of more about the mother, but the child wasn't so important. So I have to say, in the very beginning, it was really more about, to be honest, actually about a couple where one of them transforms, and it was supposed to be on the woman's side of the family. So it was actually very different. It was kind of the same story in a lot of ways, but especially with the old family was the same, but it was inverted in a way, you know. And so the child became more and more important, and I just used the possibility to have this kind of child werewolf, even though it was at the same time that the Brazilian movie came out, you know, Good Manners. And so I wasn't sure if I should still do it. But because the whole family angle was quite different and stylistically it was also quite different, I decided to go on with it. Also, I was always drawn to coming of age stories, even if it's not total horror. Like for example, Stand by Me, the Rob Reiner Stephen King adaptation, is really one of my favorite movies. Always something that really interests me to see how somebody develops into an identity, maybe. Yeah.
Now that you mentioned this, the good manners, but it also reminded me, for instance, of Wolf Children, the Japanese animated movie. There is like a few of those type of coming of age werewolf movies. So my question was going to be if those movies were an influence.
Wolf Children, I still have not seen. I have to say, I still have not seen it. Boas Maneiras, so Good Manners is I still like very much, but I knew that it was going to be quite different. Although the class struggle is also interesting because like between the black servant and like the white upper class in Brazil. So that was something that I found really interesting. So that is actually also a little bit similar. I tried really not to be influenced. It was actually a tough couple of years because there was also Grave, you know, the film by Julia Ducournau, which was a film about cannibals, and also the main character's mother was eating, like there was in the end, there was a scene where like it was revealed that she was actually been eating her husband all the time. So that was also a bit similar to what we had with the kid and the mother. All these ideas were kind of there before I saw the movies. I tried not to change everything because then I would just need to make a completely different movie. And so I kind of basically just continued kind of working with my ideas.
Where did that, let's say, like design when the kid eventually transforms? What was your main inspiration behind it?
I tried to see it a little bit more as an illness. So we tried to do something rather realistic. In terms of design, there was a movie, a Danish movie, I think, called When Animals Dream, that I found quite similar to what I wanted to do because it was also a rather realistic movie. Because the very gothic design for me, I like it, but it didn't really work for this film. I also really like the Hammer movie with Oliver Reed, Curse of the Werewolf from 1961. This is, of course, more stylized, but it's also shown like kind of as a curse, as almost like a sexual disease as well in that movie. We really didn't try to copy any movie. It was really more what would happen if this was a disease, like how would the skin change at first with the eczema. 10 years ago, I had like 2 years where my skin was covered all the time in eczema. So that also inspired me, of course. Also, I broke my arm during the movie. And so this influence in the post-production with the visual effects, this influenced me because the arm actually dislocated completely, or it transformed almost. So that was really the influence to make the bones grow beneath, and all this transformation, and kind of a little bit grotesque, but still realistic.
I also appreciate how you go for like the full-blown bestial side when you actually see the wolf. I assume it's like a mixture of CGI and also like real animals. So could you comment a bit on that decision to show like this full-blown wolf?
In the very beginning, the wolf wasn't there yet because it was more like a standard werewolf where there was never like a full wolf. And then we said it would be poetic because I wanted it to be poetic as well. So the idea was that they would really turn into complete wolf in the end. So really like a poetic kind of almost like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, like we need to go back to nature and that kind of thing. And so that the idea was really that in this disease, that in the end they would really become these like real animals, and they would not be able to turn back into humans again. So yeah, we needed a wolf in some scenes. And in the beginning, it was supposed to be more of a real wolf, and we were working with a quite famous animal wrangler in France. So he thought we could do most of it with the real wolf, but this wasn't true. And so I kind of already could see that coming during the shoot. And so I shot some of the scenes like empty plates to be sure that we could maybe fill it with like a 3D wolf. And the final combat, it was also sure that we already knew that we needed a 3D wolf for everything. Honestly, it took a long time until it really resembled the real animal. So it was a few months of work for that to really be right, because there was always something wrong, like the nose or like how it moved or the eyes. Some shots, I think it was 40 versions until it was the right version. So in the end, it was most of what you see in the movie is a 3D wolf. I mean, there's one shot in the final combat. There's like a close-up, which is the real wolf, but composited onto like a green screen. I think for the rest, there's almost nothing left of the real wolf, actually, unfortunately.
You already mentioned the Hammer film with Oliver Reed, but do you have other werewolf films that you like?
I like Ginger Snaps. It's obviously like people that are a little bit older in puberty. It's not always so good in terms of like how it's directed, but I really love the take on it, and the idea to take like female puberty is really amazing. I also like this movie that I mentioned before, When Animals Dream, which is also not like officially werewolf. I mean, it doesn't say it. That's also a really good one. But in general, I'm actually often a bit disappointed with werewolf movies. Even for the Universal movies, it's not the best one. Like the one with Lon Chaney Jr., it's not the best one. All the recent werewolf movies are usually pretty bad. Like the one with Benicio del Toro is not very good. The one with Jack Nicholson is really bad from the 90s. Okay, obviously, The Howling is great. The Howling by Joe Dante's. I mean, and American Werewolf in London. I mean, these are like the two good ones that everybody likes, and I also like, especially I prefer The Howling though, because it's really the werewolves that are like in a normal society that are like hidden. Is something that speaks to me much more than the story of the Landis film. I mean, usually vampire movies are usually much better than werewolf movies.
You were talking about how the relationship between mother and son was developed after the original idea, and of course, it is very important. So, could you expand a little bit in what you wanted to say, in the sense that we see this single mother coming of age story?
Yeah, for me, it's motherhood and generally the love between mother and child has always spoken to me, especially also the boundaries between love and when it's maybe too much. And I wanted to set it in modern society that is still kind of patriarchal. There's still a lot of patriarchy left. Because I think if there would have been mother and father, it would have been less interesting, because I really needed this kind of this way that mother and son would really need to be together all the time and needed to fight against the rest of the world. Like that, even if it's a bit toxic what she's doing as well, but it was important that she would really believe in her son and then realize that he is actually a monster, and then she wouldn't really know what to do anymore. So that was more important to me than the rest. It was also for me the best arc to really go from a mother who has no conditions in the love of her son, who then there's a moment when she almost needs to fight against him because he really belongs to the family, and then needs to find the love again. For me, it's also very important films about finding identity and how somebody struggles to find their own identity. So this was obviously the child's struggle in the film. I thought it would be a heartbreaking thing if she would need to let go of the child and lose him in a way. For me, it was the obvious ending. Like it was really a good way to create emotion, to show a mother that would need to let go of a child to save him in a way.
Then from the family, from the father side, it feels way more traditional, like when they go back to Luxembourg. And there are two themes of hunting and also religion. So I wanted to ask you, where did that come from?
Well, that's very Luxembourgish because it has changed a lot in the last 10 years or maybe 20 years even, but it's still very traditional. A lot of people go hunting, especially in the more rural areas. It's also, there's still a lot of cliques, like the rich people or maybe politicians that are a very small group of people that are still deciding. I wouldn't say that it is corruption, but it's still, if you know the right people, you can get a lot of things done. For me, yeah, it was kind of obvious to take this kind of family that would have a lot of influence and that would know everybody and they would have a lot of money and that was there, that has been there for a lot of time. That would be at the heart kind of this secret. Hunting was just something very, very male and very violent also. They always go hunting, and so they try to indoctrinate also the boy into hunting, and it would be a first step of him killing something, and then afterwards, of course, killing people. And so I always wanted to use this very Luxembourgish activity to be a first step in the indoctrination of the son.
How did you come up with this idea of, let's say, like a secret order? They know how to control this more wild side of the werewolves.
I always find it interesting if people do not accept like who they are, or if they really try to become more and more violent because they are more and more repressed. This is almost like a Nazi family in the 1940s. Like they are really well dressed and they are really severe and they can be like nice to their grandkids or whatever, but inside they stay extremely. They have to repress themselves all the time and hide their secret all the time. Actually, that was the moment where I thought, okay, this could be a different movie. Like, because we had, as we said before, we had all these other werewolf movies that are maybe a little bit similar, and also there is also maybe a child werewolf in it. So this is the moment when I said to myself, okay, this is an angle that is not in the other movies. It's almost like an anti-werewolf movie because they cannot transform at all. So it's almost like a how not to be a werewolf movie. Yeah, the Secret Order, I don't know. It's just like the Freemasons, for example, they were always in Luxembourg, and for me, that's just kind of a logical way to show that they have a secret and there are other people that are also in it from other parts of Europe. Maybe there is actually also an episode of Hammer, not a Hammer film, but there is a TV show made in 1980. It's called Hammer House of Horrors, and there is one episode about a secret society as well who are eating people. And I saw this very late, actually, when the movie was almost done, but it could have been an inspiration as well.
I also read Wolfkin like a critique to this quote unquote like civilized society, for a way to say it, like that it still hides something brutal, but that it's all about appearances.
Yeah, it can be about several things. It's of course like the colonial society that has all their richness comes obviously from something horrible that they did. And so we disguise it, like it's kind of like propaganda. It's just, you could also see it maybe as a vegan movie because it's kind of like when we kill animals, we don't really want to show it or we don't really want to know about it. And so, for example, when you have a dog or a cat when you're a child, you don't really think that there are other animals that are killed in a factory that you are eating. But it's not very different from the dog or the cat that is your pet. Of this kind of indoctrination or propaganda that is very small, but that is already present in our lives every day. This is also part of civilized society, is kind of to hide the horrible things that we need to do to have like a good life. Basically, it's like 200 years ago we had slaves, or even today we have all the people making our iPhones. For example, we have people, I don't know, children in Africa that work in mines for lithium and stuff like that to make our iPhones, you know. And so that is also really horrible, and we kind of try not to think about it, and the horrible part is always below ground, you don't see it. And so that was definitely something that I wanted to say as well. Yeah.
You already talked a little bit about this repression of the wild side and that ending where, you know, it's freedom for the character. When I watched the movie, I also thought, for example, in animals in captivity and all of that stuff, you know, I felt like this is like a bit of an ode, let's say, to wildlife and
Mm.
you know, freedom of these the animals and the creatures and so forth.
Yes, like I said, a little bit like Jean-Jacques Rousseau, like the 18th century philosopher who said like we need to be closer to nature and free and everything. And the only way for the child is to be a wolf and to be free, because either he can live in the family and so he will be subject to the beatings and maybe he will kill people for the family to keep in the freezer. He will also pretend to be a good citizen or whatever, like, and it's not for him. Like we can see in the movie after a while that it's not for him, and it's a very opportunistic way to live and very hypocritical as well. Also, it's kind of, we can kind of guess that if he would stay with the family, his mother maybe would be killed at one point because the other woman has already been killed, and the mother, she may not really collaborate enough. She may not be complicit enough, and she would probably at one point be against the family, and then maybe she would be killed like the other woman. And so there's not really much choice for the child. So the only really way for him to be with his own nature is, yeah, to become a wolf and to become to be free and go into the countryside. Also, for me, I mean, this doesn't maybe make much sense, but for me, when they are human, they sometimes eat other humans because it's maybe even more because of superiority than because of instinct. But it was kind of the cliche of the werewolf that eats human flesh. But when he becomes a wolf, he will probably just hunt other animals, or he will not try to kill people all the time. He just kills out of self-defense. Maybe the animal version is maybe more pure and more innocent than the werewolf version. Because the werewolf is kind of a bastard version, a little bit of himself. You know, it's between two states.
Oh, great. Love the film. And last question would be if you have something in the works right now.
We just got development funding with another production company for a movie called Lizard Queen. It's also Luxembourgish, also in Luxembourgish. It's going to be a little bit bigger budget, probably. It's a bit different. This is more like a young adult movie, like audience is between 17 and 25, more or less. And it's about a young girl who before the beginning of the movie, she's dead, and she's in the afterworld, and she needs to get out of the afterworld to investigate her own death, basically. So the movie is all about the day she died, and so it's more of a black comedy. It's also fantasy. It has some horror elements, but it's quite different actually. It has a lot of musical elements. So yeah, we got some development funding for that, and we may shoot it. Yeah, maybe in like a year and a half. And I'm also writing a personal movie, which is kind of a folk horror meets ecological horror. It's almost like Pet Cemetery meets folk horror meets ecological catastrophes. So I really hope to do that in the next couple of years.